Hello everyone, I hope you are fine. Today we are going to take a second course book, Footprints Without Feet, and today we are going to take a first chapter of that book. So here we are starting. So today we start with a very interesting chapter, A Triumph of Surgery, that is about a little dog, Tricky, who is pampered and overfed by his owner. Okay, and after that, how he became seriously ill, then how he's sent for veterinary doctor, and how he is cured there, and what happened at the end. We are going to learn in this chapter. I was really worried about Tricky this time. Tricky is the name of little dog. So somebody is very worried. It's called very much concerned about that dog. I had pulled up my car when I saw him in the street with his mistress, and I was shocked at his appearance. Pulled up is called when you bring something near. Okay, so pulled up my car, somebody has come through the car and he saw this on the street. He saw this owner with the dog, and he became shocked is called when you are suddenly get wondered up to see something. Appearance is called look. When I see the look of Tricky, I got shocked in the street when I came by my car. He had become hugely fat. Huge is called something very big, and fat is called when you became a little thicky. Okay, so he has come for dog. I came for a person. Dog became a little thick, a little fatty, like a blotted sausage with a leg at each corner. Now, blotted is called something swollen, okay, something that has become bigger, thicker, okay, roundy shape. And sausage is a eatable thing. So, if you have seen the hamburger type of things that is rolled down, and hot dog you have seen, the sausage is blotted sausage is a type of non-vegetarian snacks that is filled with something filling in the inside. That the meat filling is there, mince filling is there, and that is very round and cylindrical shape. So you can say blotted sausage means a cylindrical type of shape. So the dog has become, the Tricky has become just like a cylindrical shape, and all the four legs are looking just like a corner. Means he became so thick, so fleshy, so stouty that he all the legs that are not showing their length, they are just looking like each corner there are something little legs were there. His eyes bloodshot and rheumy. Bloodshot is called very much red, and rheumy is called when you are having a watery discharge, means the water is coming from your eyes and nose, a type of thick liquid. Okay, then stared straight ahead, and his tongue lolled from his jaws. Tongue lolled is called hung down. When that is called not straight, that is hung down, every time hung down from out of the mouth. So what was the condition of that dog? That was dog was looking like very fatty, like a blotted sausage, swollen sausage. His eyes were red, and some watery type of liquid was coming out from the eyes, and he was looking straight. His tongue was out of the mouth, and jaws is called that we have jaws at the side of the teeth. So jaws and teeth, jaws and between teeth, the tongue was there, but always that tongue comes out of the mouth. Now, Mrs. Pemfrey hastened to explain. Now, Mrs. Pemfrey is another character in this story. Hastened is called when you are feeling hesitate to say something. He was so listless, Mr. Harriot. Now, first person was Mr. Harriot, who had come from the car. Okay, come by the car. So, Mr. Harriot was one of the character. Mrs. Pumphrey was another character. So listless is called when you are lacking energy. There is no energy. So Mrs. Pamphry was saying Mr. Harriot, he was without energy. He seemed to have no energy. There is no energy in his. I thought he must be suffering from malnutrition. Now she was saying, I think he is not going to eat something. Malnutrition, when you are not eating required amount. Whatever you need, you are not eating, you are eating less from that. That is called malnutrition. So I have been giving him some little extra between meals to build him up. Now Mrs. Pemfrey is saying, I think my doggy has become a malnutritive. He is not eating according to his size. So I started to give him extra meals. Some malt, some cod liver oil, and a bowl of Horlicks at night to make him sleep. Nothing much really. Now Mrs. Pumphrey started to giving him malt. Now malt is type of all the type of powder, muscle building powder that you mix in milk na, like Horlicks and Bonvita, they all are made of malt. So some type of malt she gave to Tricky. Cod liver oil, cod is the name of a fish, and cod liver fish oil is very beneficial for body for maintaining the muscle. So cod liver oil she gave to Tricky, and some Horlicks, and a bowl of some Horlicks wafers he gave when he going to sleep. Nothing much really, and not else besides that. Means Mrs. Pamprey is giving him malt, mixing in the milk, then cod liver oil, and a bowl of Horlicks at the night on his bedtime. And did you cut down on the sweet thing as I told you? Now Mr. Harriet asking a question. Mrs. Pemprey, I told you don't give any type of sweet things to your dog, but are you giving, or you cut down those sweet things? Oh, I did for a bit, but he seemed to be so weak I had to relent. Now she is saying, yes, I have cut as you say, but I was very worried when I saw him. He is becoming so weak day by day. So I leave my harsh behavior. Relent is called when you leave your harsh behavior. So I cannot become very harsh with my dog. So I started time to time giving him sweet. He does love cream cakes and chocolate, so I can't bear to refuse him. Now my doggy likes to eat cakes, cream and chocolates, and I cannot refuse. Refuse is called to deny. Okay, to forbid means I cannot refuse him. I gave him. I looked down again at a little dog. That was the trouble. Now Mr. Harriet is again looking at the dog, and that has turned in a type of problem. Tricky's only fault was greed. Now greed is when you want something more and more and more. Okay, then doggy also want the things, edible things to eat more and more. He had never been known to refuse food. Means whenever anybody tries to give him food, he always accept, and he always start eating that. He never refuse for the food. He would tackle a meal at any hour of the day or night. Means at any time, like he has just taken his lunch or breakfast, and after that if you give him something to eat, he was ready to eat that. Like this was the condition. No day, no night, means proper planning was not there of eating. And I wondered about all the things Mrs. Pamfrey had not mentioned. Now, Mr. Harriet was very much wondered about this thing. Why Mrs. Pamfrey is not making a suitable, a very well-planned diet schedule for the dog? He was very wondered about this. Are you giving him plenty of exercise? Again, Mr. Harriet asked Mrs. Pamfrey, your doggy do exercise or not? Well, he has his little walks with me, as you can see, but Hodkin, the gardener. Now, Mrs. Pamfrey is saying, yes, doggy is going to take exercise with me daily, but that was little. Hodkin is the name of person, and he was a gardener in Mrs. Pamfrey's house. Mrs. Pamfrey belongs to very rich family. She was very wealthy lady. She has so much money. Each and every type of luxurious things were there in her house. So she was talking about her gardener. His name was Hodkin. Has been down with lumbago, so there has been no ring throwing lately. Now lumbago is a type of pain that you are feeling at the back of your lower back of your body. Okay, like you can see waist ache. Okay, so Hodkin is having very much pain in his lower back, so he was not coming regularly. My doggy Tricky was used to play with Hodkin about throwing the ring. Like you have seen now, we throw ring at the place, and doggy is supposed to bring that ring, and this type of exercise, again you throw the ring, again doggy bring that ring to you, again you throw, like that. So it is a type of exercise for doggies, but this type of exercise is not going to happen these days. Why? Because this exercise with Tricky, who is going to do? Hodkin, his gardener, and his gardener was not coming because of the lower muscle pain. I tried to sound severe. Severe is called something serious. Means Mr. Harriet was serious. Now I really mean this. Mean this means I really want this. If you don't cut his food right now and give him more exercise, he is going to be really ill. Mr. Harriet was saying to Mrs. Famfrey, if your dog is not going to do the exercise well and enough, he is going to be ill. You must harden your heart and keep him on a very strict diet. Now Harriet again continuing, Mrs. Pumphrey, listen, you have to make a very tight schedule of exercise and diet for your dog. Otherwise, he is going to be ill, and you have to keep yourself very hard to follow that plan. Mrs. Pumphrey wrung her hands. Wrung is called to move her hands. Okay. Mrs. Pumphrey was moving her hand and saying, oh, I will. Yes, I will do, Mr. Harriet. I'm sure you are right, but it is so difficult, so very difficult. But Mrs. Pumphrey saying, I know this is very much right. I have to give him a planned diet and a planned exercise, but you know this is very difficult. She set off head down along the road as if determined to put the new regime into practice immediately. Now, she set off is called gone. She gone, her head was down, means she was thinking, yes, whatever Mr. Harriet was saying, that was right. Regime means a prescribed course, means Mr. Harriet was prescribed a type of course, means a planned exercise or and planned diet, but that is not followed by Mrs. Pumphrey. But this time determined means confident to take the decision, means Mrs. Pumphrey was now determined that yes, I am going to take a regime, I am going to take a planned diet and a planned exercise for my doggy immediately. Immediately is called very soon. I watched their progress with growing concern. Now, I came for Mr. Harriet. Wherever the I will come in the chapter, that is for Mr. Harriet. I watched their progress with growing concern. Progress means something when you lead, okay? And growing is called to increasing. Concern is called anxiety, okay, when you are concerned, when you are worried about something. So I was seeing Mrs. Pumphrey was concerning, Mrs. Pumphrey was looking towards this side. Tricky was tottering along in his little tweed coat. Now tottering is called moving in unsteady manner, means unsteady is called when you are moving here and there, not in a straight way but round like that, okay. And tweed coat means Tricky was wearing a tweed coat made of a type of coat made of tweed, okay. Tweed is a type of fabric, a cloth. So Tricky was wearing tweed coat, but he was walking very unsteady manner. He was not walking very straight. He had a whole wardrobe of these coats. Now this is about something, the cloth of that boy, how much and how luxurious life he is going to live. So he has a wardrobe is called cupboard, okay, almirah. So when almirah was full of tweeds coat, Tricky's coat like that for the cold weather, and a raincoat for the wet days, means he has a different type of coat according to the weather. Like in winter season he is going to wear cold weather according to cold weather, and in rain coat he has to wear during the rainy days. He struggled on, drooping in his harness. Drooping is called something let down, move down, put down, okay. So struggled is called when you are forcing something, when you have to put so much effort to do something, okay. So and harness is called a type of string, okay, a type of thick thread that is round in the neck of the pet dogs, na, like and owner has to hold down that thread, and doggy is going following him, or that was means Tricky was struggling in moving, in walking. He is not walking properly. And his harness was drooping. Harness was not very straight or stiff. It was down. It was hung around. I thought it wouldn't be long before I heard from Mrs. Pomfrey. Now, this it means after many days, Mr. Harriet was having this meeting with Mrs. Pomfrey, and then Mr. Harriet was thinking that yes, now Mrs. Pomfrey is going to hurt, is going to be have a ear on whatever he has talked. Means Mrs. Pumphrey was going to be follow whatever Mr. Harriet said. The expected call came within a few days. Now Mr. Harriet was expecting means when you are hoping something. Mr. Harriet was hoping that surely Mrs. Pumphrey is going to call him, and after few days he got the call. Mrs. Pumphrey was distraught. Now distraught is called something when you are very much worried, very much concern about something, very much sad. Okay, so she was very sad, very much worried. Tricky would eating nothing. Tricky stopped eating. He was eating nothing, refused even his favorite dishes, and besides he had bouts of vomiting. Means whatever she presents to him to eat, like cakes, chocolates, Horlicks, cod liver oil, whatever is there the diet, he is not eating anything. And bouts of vomiting is called when you are vomiting in a very short hours, means very early, again and again, in very short duration you are vomiting. That is called bouts of vomiting. Means Tricky was eating nothing and he was vomiting at very small intervals. He spent all his time lying on a rug, panting, did not want to go for walks, and did not want to do anything. He means every time Tricky lie down on his rug. Rug is a type of thing that we spread on the floor, on which doggy used to sit. That is called rug. So he all the time he sit on rug. Panting is called when you breathe very frequently, when you breathe very harshly. Okay, long breathing and very quick breathing, like you when you get tired, na, like that. When you get tired or when you feel some ill, then Tricky was all the time. Tricky sit on his rug. He started taking very long and starting very breathe, long breathe, and frequent breathe, and he's not going outside to walk. He's not doing anything. I had made my plans in advance. Now Mr. Harriet was thinking about getting a call from Mrs. Pamfrey, so he had made something arrangement before that. The only way was to get Tricky out of the house for a period. Now he has to just take that dog Tricky out of from his house. I suggested that he be hospitalized for about a fortnight to be kept under observation. So when Mrs. Pemprey called on phone Mr. Harriet told her that Tricky is going to be admitted in my hospital for about 15 days. Fortnight it called, for about 15 days under observation. Observation is called treatment. The poor lady almost swooned. Now swooned is called when fainted, like when you are feeling very much unconsciousness and extreme emotions you cannot control, and you feel something like you reeling and falling down on the floor, like that. Means the condition of Mrs. Pamfrey was not good. Hearing this, she was sure he would pine and die if he did not see her every day. Now pine is called when you miss something, when you long for something. Okay, means she was thinking if somebody will take her dog away from him, away from her for 15 days, how she can be bear, she cannot bear the sadness. So she was missing this thing very much, and she was getting very worried because every day she has to see the face of Tricky. But I took a firm line. Firm line is called when you are very determined, take a very strong decision. But Mr. Harriet has taken a very strong decision. Tricky was very ill, and this was the only way to save him. Now Tricky was really ill, and this is the only way, means to bring him for the treatment was the only way to cure him. In fact, I thought it is the best to take him without delay. Now Mr. Harriet's thing, Mr. Harriet thought that I should not waste any time and bring Tricky just in a minute. Now, followed by Mrs. Pemfrey's wailing, I marched out to the car carrying the little dog wrapped in a blanket. Now, wailing is called crying. Mrs. Pemfrey was crying, and I marched out means come out. Now, he went inside the home and come out of the car, come out from the house and take that dog, that little dog, and cover him in a blanket. Wrapped is called cover. The entire staff was roused, and maids rushed in and out bringing his day bed, his night bed, favorite cushions, toys, and rubber rings, breakfast bowls, lunch bowls, then supper bowls, in each and everything. Now, as I told you, Mrs. Pumphrey was a very wealthy lady, and she was having each and everything luxurious thing. So, same as Tricky, the dog was also having so many things. Mrs. Pumphrey has having so many maids, so many servants were there. So all roused. Roused is called to get up. After hearing that Tricky is going for the treatment, every servant get up and rushed. Rushed is called to go, to move. They all moved in the house to bring all the Tricky's thing, all the things related to dog, like Tricky's day bed was different than night bed, his cushions, his toys, his rubber rings from which he used to play, breakfast bowl, then lunch bowl, then supper bowl. Supper is called dinner bowl. So all the things they collected in one place and bring all the things. Realizing that my car would never hold all this stuff, I started to drive away. Now, Mr. Harriet was not having this much of a space in his car to keep all these things, so he sit inside the car and started to drive away. He started the car and went away. As I moved off, Mrs. Pumphrey, with a despairing cry, threw an armful of the little coats through the window. Now, moved off is called when I started going on, Mrs. Pumphrey come, and despairing is called very much sad, means very much with a emotional heart, with full heart she was crying, and she threw armful means very means so many little coats of Tricky she threw out from the window. Each and every coat was there for different weather. I looked in the mirror before I turned the corner of the drive. Everybody was in tears. Means Mr. Harriet sit inside the car, but in the car there was no such a space, not such a space he can keep all these things. Means so many things related to Tricky was there, but he cannot keep all these things. So when he was moving, there is a rear glass now in the car, at the side of the car when you drive the car. So through that glass, Mr. Harriet can see that everybody, whoever was standing outside of the house, everybody was crying. Why they all were crying? Because Tricky the dog was going out of the house. Out on the road, I glanced down at the pathetic little animal gasping on the seat by my side. Now, a glance down is called to look down. Pathetic is called very much pity, poor little animal. And gasping is called struggling to breathe. Means Tricky was so fatty that he was not able to breathe properly. Okay, so he was taking very much trouble in breathing, and he was sitting quietly near me. I patted the head, and Tricky made a brave effort to wag his tail. Now, like we patted the head of the animal, so Mr. Harriet patted his head lightly, and in the response, Wiggy wagged his tail. Wag is called move his tail. Poor old lad, I said. Lad is called a young boy. Okay, it means a young boy. This came for Tricky, means a young dog. Okay, so he said, a poor young dog, you have not a kick in you, but I think I know a cure for you. Now, Mr. Harriet was saying there is no energy inside but you, but I will cure you. I will do treatment of you. Kick means energy. At the surgery, the household dogs surged round me. Now, surgery is a place where all the doctors, all the surgeons, they do treatment of the patient. That is, the place is called surgery. So, all the household dogs surged. Surged is called move forward or upward, means as he came to his veterinary hospital, all the other dogs, means there were so many dogs in his hospital. As Mr. Harriet came to the hospital, all the dogs came and surged around me. Surged is called move around him. Tricky looked down at the noisy pack with dull eyes and, when put down, lay motionless on the carpet. Now Tricky looked down all these toys. Noisy pack. Noisy is called something which are making noise, and pack has come for group of the dog. Pack is called group of dog. Means so many dogs were there, and Tricky look all the toys with his dull eyes. Means there was no energy in his eyes, and when I put him down, he lay down on the carpet motionless. Motionless is called without moving. The other dogs, after sniffing around him for a few seconds, decided he was an uninteresting object and ignored him. Now, sniffing is called smelling. Whenever anything came near dog, the dog started smelling them. You must have seen. So all the dog come, means Tricky was a new dog for all them. So all the dog came near Tricky. They started smelling him. Bus. Tricky was doing nothing. It is just lying down and a very pathetic and poor dog. So it is going to be very uninteresting. Means all the dog find no interest in him, and they ignored him and they went out. I made up a bed for him in a warm, loose box next to the one where the dogs were all slept. Other dogs slept. So Mr. Harriet and dog make a bad dog for him in a warm box, means in a small box he made a bed for Tricky and place him near other beds where all the dogs used to sleep. For 2 days I kept an eye on him. Kept an eye is called to watch him, to see him. Means for 2 days he has done nothing, any type of treatment he has done, but only looked him for 2 days, giving him no food but plenty of water. Means first 2 days Mr. Harriet gave him nothing to eat but only water to drink. At the end of the second day, he started to show some interest in his surroundings. Now for 2 days, Tricky was lying down without any motion, without any movement. But after 2 days, he started showing some interest. Surrounding is called whatever the atmosphere, nearby atmosphere. Means he was at a new place. Now after 2 days, Tricky was showing his interest in that new place. And on the third, he began to whimper, and when he heard the dogs in the yard. Now whimper is called make a series of sound. Okay, means that is a expression of fear, expression of pain. Means at the first time he was showing no response when all the dogs were coming, but from third day he started showing his response. So whimper, you can say, a type of expression containing fear of pain. When I opened the door, Tricky trotted out and was immediately engulfed by Joe. Now trotted is called ran with the short step, means he was running but running slowly. Okay, and engulfed is called covered, or covered from all the sides. So when Mr. Harriet opened the door, Tricky was coming. Tricky was running slowly, and immediately, means very soon, Joe came and covered him. Joe is the name of other dog, the greyhound. Greyhound is the breed of dog. Whose breed? Joe. Joe is the another dog, and he was greyhound, and his friend, means so many other dog were there, and in those dogs there was one dog, Joe, that is greyhound, and Joe covered Tricky. After rolling him over and thoroughly inspecting him, the dogs moves off down the garden. Now all the dogs has come. Now Tricky is showing response, so all the dogs also come, started smelling him, round over him, going here and there, and after that they all moved off. Moved off is called went out in the garden. Tricky followed them, rolling slightly with his surplus fret. Till now, Tricky was still very much fatty. He was having so much trouble in walking. But even then, when all went out in the garden, Tricky was also went out in the garden before them, and rolling slightly. Rolling is called moving his body, rolling, and surplus is called plenty, big fat, means with his big body, with his fatty body, he was rolling his body down to the garden. Later that day, I was present at feeding time. Now, feeding time is called when you are giving to feed them, when they are having their lunch time. So, at the time of lunch, Mr. Harriet was there. Then I watched while Tristan sloped the food into the bowls. Now, Tristan is a type of dog. Sloped is called spillover. Means when dog eats the food, you must have seen the dog's bowl, na? Eating food bowl. Means a type of bowl was there from which the doggy started licking their food with their tongue. So when they lick the food their tongue, na, so some of the food spill over around the bowl and put on the floor, and all the floor become dirty. So Tristan was a dog who was eating and his food, and some of the food was spilling around the bowl. There was a usual headlong rush. Now, headlong rush is called initial rush. Initial rush means when everybody want to come first to finish his food first. So there was a type of initial rush by sound of high speed eating. Means everybody was trying to eat very fast and very in a competitive manner. Every dog knew that if he fell behind the others, he was liable to have some competition for the last part of his meal. Means it means when each and every dog was knowing this thing. If he became late to finish their food, then all other doggy will come after finishing their food and started eating from his bowl. So everybody was finishing their food first, so that no other doggy will come and finish their food. When they had finished, Tricky took a walk round the shining bowls, licking casually inside one or two of them. Now, every dog, whoever was eating their meal there, or all the doggy has taken their lunch or brunch, whatever is there, and then Tricky came to the different bowl and started licking. Licking is called to started eating with his tongue. So one or two shining bowls. Shining bowls means all the food was finished and bowls were shining, or means empty bowls. So Tricky has come and started licking the bowl. Next day, an extra bowl was put out for him, and I was pleased to see him jostling his way towards it. Now, next day, a new bowl for Tricky has been come there, and Mr. Harriet was very happy. Pleased is called happy. Mr. Harriet was happy to see him jostling. Jostling is called to fight something to get. Okay, means now after 3 days, means for starting for 2-3 days, Tricky was not eating something. But one day, Mr. Harriet saw that when all the dogs were taking their lunch, taking their food, Tricky also shows the interest to eat the food. Okay, so from next time, a new bowl for Tricky has come, and means food for Tricky has come. I tried to sound severe. Severe is called something serious. Means Mr. Harriet was serious. Now I really mean this. Mean this means I really want this. If you don't cut his food right now and give him more exercise, he is going to be really ill. Mr. Harriet was saying to Mrs. Famfrey, if your dog is not going to do the exercise well and enough, he is going to be ill. You must harden your heart and keep him on a very strict diet. Now, Harriet again continuing, Mrs. Pumphrey, listen, you have to make a very tight schedule of exercise and diet for your dog. Otherwise, he is going to be ill, and you have to keep yourself very hard to follow that plan. Mrs. Pumphrey wrung her hands. Wrung is called to move her hands. Okay. Mrs. Pumphrey was moving her hand and saying, oh, I will. Yes, I will do, Mr. Harriet. I'm sure you are right, but it is so difficult, so very difficult. But Mrs. Pumphrey saying, I know this is very much right. I have to give him a planned diet and a planned exercise, but this is very difficult. She set off head down along the road as if determined to put the new regime into practice immediately. Now, she set off is called gone. She gone. Her head was down means she was thinking, yes, whatever Mr. Harriet was saying, that was right. Regime means a prescribed course, means Mr. Harriet was prescribed a type of course, means a planned exercise or and planned diet, but that is not followed by Mrs. Pumphrey. But this time determined means confident to take the decision, means Mrs. Pumphrey was now determined that yes, I am going to take a regime, I am going to take a planned diet and a planned exercise for my doggy immediately. Immediately is called very soon. Now, we could hardly believe it when the brandy came to put a final age on Tricky's constitution. Now, constitution is called the composition of blood, means to make the composition of blood very fine, very good. Now, brandy started coming, so all became very wondered. Oh, now brandy has come for Tricky. For a few nights, the fine spirit was rolled around, inhaled, and reverently drunk. Now, for the few nights means like uh, whatever the days were going on when Tricky was in the hospital. So, a fine spirit means everybody was very joyful, and as the days while rolling around, inhale the reverently drunk. Reverently is called respectfully, means everybody was inhaling is called when you are breathing in something. Everybody was taking a smell of the brandy and wine, and they very with very respect they all are eating and drinking those days. They were days of deep content, means all these days when Tricky was there in the hospital, that was the days of content is called satisfaction, means everybody was very satisfied. Startling well with the extra egg in the morning, improved the sustained by midday wine, and finishing luxuriously round the fire with the brandy. Now see which type of luxurious lives is going to be led by the hospital staff and Mr. Harriet. Means in the morning time they are going to eat eggs, then in their lunch time they are going to take wine, and in the dinner time they are going to finish with it brandy. Luxurious is called royal, okay. Sustain is called to constant, permanent, means all permanent is called means for those days brandy and wine was permanent, means all the stock were ready for that to drink every day. It was a temptation to keep Tricky on as a permanent guest. Now temptation is called a type of attraction, means everybody was very attractive and happy that Tricky is a guest in those days in their hospital, because everybody was having so much good thing to eat. So everybody why everybody is not liking to have Tricky in their hospital. But I knew Mrs. Pumphrey was suffering, and after a fortnight felt compelled to phone and tell her that the little dog had recovered and was awaiting collection. But I came for Mr. Harriet. Now Mr. Harriet told Mrs. Pumphrey that yes, now 15 days has passed, and on phone he felt compelled. Compelled is called very much satisfied, okay. And then he was compelled to tell that yes, now doggy your doggy is recovered, he is all okay, you can come and take her. Awaiting is called it is what it is awaiting, it is waited that you come and take your dog. Within minutes, about 30 feet of gleaming black metal drew up outside the surgery. Means after making a call, within some minutes, 30 feet gleaming is called shining black metal. Now gleaming black metal shows the body of a car, means there was a 30 feet long shining black car came outside of the surgery. The chauffeur opened the door, and I could just make out a figure of Mrs. Pumphrey almost lost in the interior. Now, the car was so much decorated from inside, and Mrs. Pumphrey was sitting inside the car, that as the chauffeur opened the door, chauffeur is called driver of the car. As the driver of the car opened the door, I can hardly see Mrs. Pumphrey, because there was so much decorated car from inside. Her hands were tightly clasped in front of her. Now, clasp is called to put, means she was putting her hand in her lap. Her lips trembled. Trembled is called shivering, moving. Oh, Mr. Harriet, do tell me the truth. Is he really better? Now, as she arrived to the hospital, now she asked, Mr. Harriet, please tell me what is the condition of my doggy. Is he okay now? Yes, he is fine. There is no need for you to get out of the car. I'll go and fetch him. Now Mr. Harriet said, please don't come out of the car. He is fine. I am going and fetch him. Fetch is called to bring him. Means Mr. Harriet said, you sit here. Please don't come out. I am going and bring your dog. I walked through the house into the garden. Now, from garden, he walked inside the house. A mass of dog was hurtling round and round the lawn, and in their midst, ears flapping, tail waving, was the little golden figure of Tricky. Mass is called a group of dogs. Means so many dogs were there. Hurtling round means walking around. They were walking around in the garden, in the lawn of the house, and in between, among all the dogs, there was a little golden figure. Tricky was there. Now see, surplus body or the blotted sausage is not used for Tricky, because now Tricky is recovered. Now Tricky has become having with a very fine body. In 2 weeks he had been transformed into a lithe, hard muscles animal. Lithe is called flexible. Now Tricky became a very flexible animal. Very hard muscles means his muscles became very strong in these 2 weeks, in 15 days. He was keeping up well with the pack, stretching out in great bounds. Pack is called the group of dogs. Means when Mr. Harriet arrived to take Tricky, Tricky was playing with other dogs. He was stretching out. Stretching means playing and stretching his body. Great bounds. Bounds is called when he is moving his body round and round. His chest almost brushing the ground. Means he was just rolling his body on the ground, and his chest was brushing, means rolling on the ground. He was so close to the ground. I carried him back along the passage to the front of the house. Now Mr. Harriet go take him in his lap and came back to the passage of his house. The chauffeur was still holding the car door open, and when Tricky saw his mistress, now chauffeur means driver, was still holding the car door, and he was waiting for him, and Tricky has come and he saw his owner. Tricky saw his mistress. He took off from my arms in a tremendous leap and sailed into Mrs. Pumphrey's lap. Now, when Tricky saw his mistress, his owner, he just take a very fine jump from my arm and sit in Mrs. Pumphrey's lap. Tremendous is called very fine, and leap is called jump, and sailed is called to sit. She gave a startled oh, and then had to defend herself as he swarmed over her, licking her face and barking. She was very wondered. Mrs. Pumphrey was very wondered after seeing Tricky, and she startled. She said, "Oh," and but she has to defend herself. Swarmed is called means Tricky was coming over her body, licking her face, and barking is called he was barking. Tricky was barking. So all this thing means Tricky was showing his happiness. He was very happy in coming to Mrs. Pumphrey's. During the excitement, I helped the chauffeur to bring out the bats, toys, cushions, coats, and bowls, none of which had been used. Now, during the excitement means also Mr. Harriet was also very happy. Now, Tricky was going from his treatment out after his treatment. So, all his things chauffeur is going to bring, and Mr. Harriet was also helping chauffeur, the driver, to bring all his things like bat, toys, cushion, coats, and bowls, all these things, but they are not at all used during those days. As the car moved away, Mrs. Pumphrey leaned out of the window. Means now all the things were kept in the car, and Tricky was in with Mrs. Pumphrey. Car started, but when the car was moving, Mrs. Pumphrey looked out from the car, from the window. Tears shone in her eyes. Her lips trembled, and tears was coming in Mrs. Pumphrey's eyes, and her lips was moving. Her lips was shivering. "Oh, Mr. Harriet," she cried, "how can I ever thank you? This is a triumph of surgery." Means she was so happy after getting Tricky back, she was giving a very emotional thanks to Mr. Harriet, that Mr. Harriet, I am very thankful to you, and that you have made a so drastic change in my doggy, and this is really a type of victory of your surgery. So here we have completed the chapter. Now I'm going to give you some of the hard words. With the help of those meanings, just try to explain the chapter line by line yourself. I'm sure that you are must going to learned or understood well what is the story of this chapter. Now your part came, or write down all the hard words and learn those hard words and try to give the explanation according to you. So these are the hard words from the chapter I explained for you, and I suppose you to write down in the notebook. Sausage is a finely minced meat stuffed into a long cylindrical case and divided into small lengths by twisting or tying. Rheumy is a watery discharge from the mucous membrane, especially of nose or eyes. Listless is lacking energy and enthusiasm. Lumbago is muscle pain in the lower part of the back, that is called lumbar region. Regime is called prescribed course of exercise and diet. Distraught is called extremely worried. Surgery is a place where the doctor, a dentist, or a veterinary surgeon treats patient. Scrimmage is rough or confused struggle. Convalescing is called recovering from an illness, and lit is called flexible. Now besides these hard words, there are more hard words. While explaining the chapters, at the same time I was explaining the meaning of those hard words. If you want, you can also join other hard words in this glossary and write down in your notebook. Okay, so that's it for now. We'll meet again.